Today, let's talk about change, facing the challenges of it because it is for sure everywhere. So, change, consciousness, and taking the stigma off of metaphysics. First, let's take a look at change. You know, we are hardwired to resist it. And I've talked about this in other videos and other conversations, but we really are hardwired to resist it because change can be dangerous. We want safety at all costs. This is definitely in our DNA way back from the caveman days. But as light workers, you also know that change is an inherent part of daily life here on Earth, that nothing stays constant. Everything is in a constant state of change. And now we add on the fact that we've got all of this information and disinformation coming in from the internet. We've talked about this before. We've got more and more people wanting to stand up and speak their light. We've got more and more conversations with finger pointing going on in the world and all of these power games. So it's like we're getting pulled in all of these different directions as a society, as a culture, and as a world. So I'm asking you just to stop for a moment and take a look at your life. Take a look at the change that you're wanting to affect in your life and the change that is being slammed at you. So just take a look at it and let go of how you think it needs to come down. And really take a moment to look within and feel the love of you rising up from your divine soul knowing. And ask yourself, where do I want to go? What do I really want? Where do I want to go? What do I want to express of myself? That's your basis. And then as a culture, we need to really think about where do we want to go as a culture? What do we want our guiding compass to be? Because otherwise we'll continue to be pulled in left and right and up and down and sent around in circles. And then, oh, just I need a break and go look at a fluffy cat video. Okay, so take a look at your individual life. What do you want your guiding compass to be? What direction are you going? Do you want to go? What do you want to express about yourself? And then take a look at where you want us to go culturally. And be as specific as you can, because divine light only thinks in the positive. And we've talked about this before, positive images. Okay. What are people thinking? You know, beyond some of the finger pointing that's going on the internet. And I've gotten into a conversation with a lot of young people recently. Partly that's the age that I'm at, that I'm thinking about, okay, what's being passed on? Holy camole, how did we get here? You know, taking a look at the ramifications of the internet and how that just grew so fast, well beyond our old established rules of conduct, and how it sometimes has a tendency to feed the worst in us rather than lift us up to the best in us. But that is going to come back to the individual choice that we all make. I'm seeing talked about more. This young fella that I was speaking about that was saying, they don't feel bad about what they've done. And I was talking to him about how, the power at the top has always wanted the masses compliant. It's been that way. You can go all the way back to Sumerian records, and I think that's like 6,000 BC. So it's always been that way. But we have never, ever, ever, ever been in a position where we, the people, can affect change like never before. The things that we whispered about 35 years ago in the corner of speakers conventions as we were trying to insert new ideas into the collective consciousness has now become part of pop psychology. We've got the tools here for us each individually to do that stop, look, let love. Let love flow. Let your light shine. The tools are in place. More and more people are talking about it than ever before. Okay, so consciousness is part of this conversation, and it's very interesting to listen to people that are almost ashamed to sound woo. But you're going to have to go to woo, because consciousness is all there is. I recently came across a fella on the internet, Chris Langan, and apparently he introduced this concept back in the 90s or late 80s, 90s. I missed it. It's just now come across my path. He is has got the highest recorded IQ in America, if not the world. He's so far off the charts that they can't even measure him. And he's autodidactic, which means he is self-taught. And he's come up with this thing that's called the CTMU, the Consciousness Theoretical Model of the Universe, CTMU. And basically what he's done is he has mathematically proven that God exists. Now, that's pretty cool. When I heard that, I said, okay, I need to know more about this. And the language of his thesis and papers, it's like I'm having to stop every 2 minutes. I've been really digging in, but stopping every 2 minutes to look up a new word that is very diffused within the intellectual community, but it's not part of our everyday language. And I mapped out basically what it was saying. And in mapping it out, what I found interesting was how things started to make sense. Now, as I share this with you, follow me on this, because I want you to figure out, where do you fall on this map? And basically, I had the bottom was consciousness, metaphysics. You know, you've got to go to metaphysics if you're going to talk consciousness. And along this river, on one side, you have the philosophy, I think, therefore I am. And now we've got the religions that are talking, you know, let us pray. We've got the light workers, I am one with all. All of these are the thoughts. And it's harder to measure this. It's just harder to measure. How do you measure a thought? You can measure the effects of a thought, but you can't really measure a thought. And then on the other side of the river, with the philosophy of, if you can't measure it, it's not real. And that's where you get your sciences, and that's where you get your math. So these are all the measurement things, okay? And I've always been a spiritual scientist. It's like, let's take these things that are on this side of the river, and let's put them into practice. If you're not using it at the grocery store, you're not putting it into practice. So you put these thoughts and ideas into practice, and you look at the results, and then you refine and tweak as you go. And so then that way you've got measurable results. You might not be able to measure the thought or the idea, but you can measure the results of it. The essence of consciousness is who you are. The essence of consciousness is your thoughts. The essence of the measurable results is what emotional fuel do you put into the actions to lean into to create concrete change in your life. Okay. So go back to where you're taking a look at what's your compass for your life. What do you want to express of yourself? And then find the voice. It's very, very important, if we're going to affect change culturally, or even change in your life, that you find the courage to start to speak up, just to speak it. And it's amazing the magic in that can happen. Just last week, I was at a lunch. It was Monday after Easter. And in Italy, it's Pasquetta. And so I was invited to a lunch. We're out in the country. There's like 15, 16 people seated at the table. And the thing that's lovely about Italy is that you get 15, 16 people seated at the table, and they come from all walks of life. Some are business owners, some are farmers, some are philosophers, you know, some just work in a factory. Some are retired, some are just starting their careers. In other words, it's just a whole entrepreneur. It's just a whole mixed bag of people. And as we were sitting there and talking, and there's some people I didn't know, and I met one man that I'd never met, and he asked what you did. And normally I would temper that based on who I thought was in front of me, so that I could speak in their language. But that particular day, I said, you know, I use the vibrations of, I help people use the vibrations of unconditional love to transform those limiting thoughts and beliefs about who they are, so that they can live their divine soul purpose. Now that's heady for a lot of people, but his face just lit up, and he went, oh, let's talk about And we ended up having this amazing conversation that I never would have had if I'd given him a standard elevator answer for where I thought people wouldn't understand. Find the courage within you. Just say it. If they get it, that's great. If they don't, then you could scale it back, or you could scale it in another direction. But find your courage to speak up and speak your light. Find the courage, because as a light worker, it's really, really important that we continue our behind the work scenes, that we continue the work on ourselves, but that we also bring it more into a public piazza. Period. We have to bring it more into a public piazza. That way other people feel safe. And then they'll go, oh, well, what's that about? And they'll get curious. And maybe you're just planting one seed, and maybe somebody else plants another seed, and maybe somebody else plants another seed, but that's how we grow our garden. Okay, so just accept the fact that you're a divine soul having a human experience. You're not a human with a divine soul, knowing you are a divine soul. We are all divine souls having human experiences. And if you can remember that you do not need to reach out to the universe to bring it into you, that the universe is already flowing through you. Think Big Bang. And then your thought into being. You become self-sentient. So you're in this flow. That means everything around you is the universe. It's already here. You're in it. You're living and breathing and eating and drinking and loving and growing in the universe. And you are a self-sentient light being in this universe that decided to come into a human body to have this human experience. The universe is flowing through you. And then it's manifesting from the unseen world to the seen world through your thoughts. And those thoughts are registering in your human experience. You're having an emotional reaction to it. And from that emotional reaction, that's driving your actions. So it's either holding you back or you're leaning into it and moving forward. If it's holding you back, ask, is it for my highest good to be held back? You know, maybe you're holding yourself back from jumping off a cliff. But maybe you're holding yourself back for fear of not belonging to what you already know. And that's the fear of the change kicking in. That's the fear of moving out of your comfort zone. We have to move out of our comfort zone. Otherwise, the world is going to pull us along and we'll end up being a sheep. And nobody wants to be that. So keep that in mind about consciousness. And now let's talk about metaphysics. Metaphysics has got it's kind of had a dirty, laughed at, oh, they're woo, they're into metaphysics. And I listen to people just throw that off all day long in these different intellectual conversations that I'm participating in. But then at the same time, they're talking about consciousness and afraid to be labeled the woo. So we need to take the stigma off of that. And you start by taking the stigma off of it on yourself. You're a light worker. You know it's not a bad thing. Yet, ask yourself, is that what's holding you back from speaking your light? Is that what's holding you back from having the conversations? I'm not talking about evangelizing. I'm talking about just speaking your truth. You know, if that stigma is a part of what's holding you back, then you know what you do. You do your stop, look, let love. You've seen it, let it go, look within, let love flow through. Infinite intelligence, omniscient wisdom, and omnipotent unconditional love of divine light can transform that into illumination. If you ask it and you're willing to allow it. It's really that simple. It's not always easy because you're going against the grain or against the current of your past conditioning, but it is very simple. And it's just a question of doing it. And when you're really doing it, you'll feel yourself relax into it, and you will feel an expansion of relaxation. And you will literally feel the warmth flowing up with practice. And that's the warmth of infinite unconditional love happening. In being willing to talk about it, then you're taking the stigma off of metaphysics. And what I find interesting, I found myself doing recently, is in these conversations, I will just interject thoughts and say, how would you, if you were not afraid of that label of woo, what would you say differently? And it's very interesting how people then feel more free to have more authentic conversations. So that's if I'm in a conversation where it's actually active and I'm able to do that and it's not just written. If it's written on the internet, then I will just interject the thought of, gee, do you think we could have this conversation without the stigma of woo or without the stigma of metaphysics? And really discover what it does mean to be having a conversation that goes beyond the physical. So let's have a conversation about what happens before it manifests into concrete measurable results. You see, if you're on the science side of the river, if you're on that, if it's not measurable, it's not real side of the river, and you're wanting to measure into consciousness, you're never really going to get there. The only thing that you can measure are the concrete results of consciousness. Okay, so these are some things that I've given you to consider. Let's pull it back down to a very individual scale. Take a look at where you want your life to go. You can take a look at relationships. You can take a look at career. You can take a look at emotional freedom. You can take a look at courage. You can take a look at clarity, but really decide, what direction do you want your life to go? Be sure to have a conversation about that with the people that are around you. If you happen to be in a close-knit family situation, if you're traveling solo, then it becomes a whole lot easier. But be sure to communicate that, find out where they want to go, find out what they're really feeling the stirrings for, and then come up with a plan on how you could do that together. So take a look at, what's our guiding light? What's our guiding compass? How do we want to express ourselves more fully and freely, joyfully, joyously, unlimited, uninhibited? Because that's what we were made to do. And then, if you feel called, let's also transmit that to a public platform. But I do encourage you to take a moment to really feel into where you want to go and remember who you are. We're all divine souls having human experiences with the universe that's already flowing through us. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for being interested in learning on how to live your light more fully and freely with emotional freedoms that you haven't even yet begun to dream of, and that gives you the courage and clarity to live your divine soul purpose. Now, just so that I play well with the algorithms here on YouTube, be sure to like the video. Please leave me a comment, because I do love more two-way conversations, and subscribe if you want to stay in touch with any of the new material that I'm putting out there.